Okay, I hope you enjoyed that story. I know it's a little different for what we normally do on the podcast, but again, I figured you'd appreciate it, and it's a nice segue into the things that you got to do after having a baby. The first one, it doesn't really count as something you have to do after, unless you forgot to do it before. So this doesn't count on the list. It's a 0. It's update your W-4. And the reason that you need to do that is pretty relevant right now because, well, it's tax season. If you get a big refund from the IRS, it's because too much money, too much of your paycheck was withheld, and they owe it back to you. In essence, you could think of it as they got to borrow money from you at 0% interest throughout the year. So I don't like having a big refund. I don't want to lend my money to the government interest-free for any duration of time. I would really like my tax filing to have a refund that's relatively small. This year, it's, I believe, under $100. And I don't expect it to be much bigger for 2024. Reason being is on January 1st, I called HR and I said, hey, I am going to be having a baby this year. I would like to add another dependent on my W-4 and increase my deductions and reduce my withholdings. Now, there's a little bit of a risk doing this before the baby's born because if something tragic were to happen and the baby doesn't make it, you have a situation where you had too little withheld and you'll owe a lot come April 15th. So the 0th item is when you're ready, update your W-4 so that your withholdings aren't going to be too much and you're not lending the government money. Okay, let's move on to item number 1, and that's going to be calling insurance. When you have a baby, insurance needs to be updated. Most importantly, probably, in my opinion, is your health insurance. Now, we covered it recently on the podcast. I don't have health insurance. I have a cost-sharing ministry, and the situation is the same. I am responsible for calling them up after the baby's born and saying, hey, we got to add this kid to well, it's not a policy for me, but if you have insurance, it's a policy. You want to make sure that they get coverage right away in case something medically happens. Now, you may very well need proof of the birth. The hospital will very often give you what amounts to a trinket of a birth certificate, but it can be used to help prove that you had a child born at that hospital. And I'm pretty sure that most insurances would take something from the hospital as evidence that the baby's born ahead of you getting your official state-issued birth certificate for the kid. But there are other insurance things that you need to update too. For example, homeowners or renters insurance, they're going to want to know that you have an extra person living in the house. And here's a big one, we're going to touch on this later, identity theft protection. If you pay for identity theft protection, you're going to want to add your kid on that ASAP. And while you're updating all the insurance stuff, you now have a life event that qualifies you, most likely, to update the benefits that your employer offers you. Now, I grouped all of the insurance things into one bucket, but there's something that you need to do to update some of the insurances, and that's going to be getting state-issued evidence that you have a kid. You need to get the birth certificate, and you're going to need a social security number for the baby. Now, I always thought that was odd. Why does a baby need a social security number? Well, that's going to be easier for me to just let CGP Grey answer this in his video. Your social security card is insecure.
And if you're trying to keep track of everyone, as say the United States Tax Department might want to do, it can be a real problem, particularly in the pre-computer days. Hey, wait a minute, look at this number just lying around, the Tax Department said. It's not supposed to be used as an ID number, said the Social Security Department. There are security reasons you should yoink. Thus, the Tax Department piggybacked off of the work the Social Security Department did assigning working adults a number, which made tracking taxes easier.
Now, because I'm only taking clips from this, you should know that when the United States became a country, the citizens did not want a universal citizen ID card or number. So we didn't have something that could be used to track people. The Social Security Administration was the first time that something kind of existed like that, but it wasn't built to be a secure ID.
And they highly encouraged parents to get a Social Security number for their children by tying it to a tax discount. Crazily, counting children for tax rebates used to run on the honor system. The U.S. Tax Department told people, 1, we will give you a discount on your taxes for each child you have, and 2, write down your number of children. Please be honest, we don't have a way to check. which was just asking, nay, begging people to lie, which they did, birthing on paper millions of phantom children. But after requiring each kid to have a Social Security account number connected to a birth certificate before the parents could get the tax discount, all those phantoms faded away.
And that's why your baby needs a Social Security number right away. So A, you can get a tax break, and B, the government can verify that your tax-deductible dependent exists.
This turned the Social Security number into a unique number that all citizens had right from the start, and that made it easy for lots of other places like banks and schools and companies and landlords to also piggyback on the number as an easy way to keep track of people without having to come up with their own systems, and to be able to exchange information about people between institutions.
And this includes insurance companies. I'm pretty sure for both of my kids, the hospitals that they were born in sent the form for the Social Security number off, and we received the Social Security card in the mail within a couple weeks. For the birth certificate, though, we had to go to a particular location and pay for those to be printed in person. So we had a little bit of footwork to do to get that document. But once we had them together, well, then we could be dangerous in updating things. And that brings me to the third thing that you probably need to update, and that's going to be your will alongside the beneficiaries on your retirement accounts. Now, it's important to update your will when you have a kid for two main reasons. One is you don't want them to be left out of the will. If something horrible were to happen to you, and let's say you had another kid or kids before this one, they're in the will. They get left stuff. What about the new guy? What about your new child? If you don't update it so that they're in there, well, are they excluded from the will? I'm sure you can have a will that's written so that subsequent children get a fair share of inheritance, but it's always going to be better to have them explicitly listed in the will. And the other reason why you need to update your will for them is to very intentionally articulate if something were to happen to you or your significant other, who is going to take care of the kid in your absence? If you don't, how do we know who's going to be taking care of your children? Who's going to end up responsible for your child? What if the family member that the state decided should take care of your child isn't someone you approved of? You didn't want them to be in charge of your child. What if they decide that even if there was someone you wanted, that your child should go into the foster care system? Now, because it's a tragic scenario, we don't want to think about it. And it's not top of our mind. It's not top of the list. We want baby snuggles right now. We don't want to be updating a will. But that's all the more reason why I need to mention it to you as something that's important to do. And when it comes to the retirement accounts, you can have beneficiaries and you can have contingent beneficiaries. I list Amanda as my beneficiary on all my retirement accounts. But if something were to happen to both of us, well, what happens to the retirement monies? I have articulated that inherited IRAs are to go to my children if something were to happen to both of us. Oliver and Isaac are listed as equal contingent beneficiaries on every one of our retirement accounts. And this reminds me of another place where you can list beneficiaries, and that's going to be your life insurance policy. Now, this might have been something that would have been better to mention with the updating insurance, but your life insurance, you have got a beneficiary for it. Like Amanda's the beneficiary on my life insurance, and I'm the beneficiary on the one that's on her. But what if something happens to both of us? Well, for us, we have the individuals who are listed to take care of our children in our will as contingent beneficiaries on the life insurance. Because we believe that if they're going to be taking care of the kids, we don't want them to be an undue financial burden. We want them to be financially empowered to do a good job raising the kiddos. So that's not a recommendation. It's not a have to, but it's what I'm doing. And I figure you could benefit from hearing what my plan was. All right, number 4. This is the important one. Freeze your new child's credit. Jay, my child is a baby. They don't know how to talk. They eat, poop, and sleep. Why do I need to worry about freezing their credit? Well, there are 2 big reasons why I think it's important for you to do this. And the first of which that we're covering comes from ngpf.com. They have a question of the day here on their website. The question is, how many minors have had their identity stolen? And their answer, believe it or not, is 1 in 50. What isn't very clear here is that 1 in 50 is yearly. 1 in 50 children every year has their identity stolen. If we jump over to safehome.org, they clarify that by the end of their childhood, 1 in 10 kids fall victim to identity theft. And for my second point, I'm going to read some of the stories that are here on safehome.org. Jumping right in, one of the first major studies on children identity theft was carried out in 2011. The results were eye-opening. For example, they found that a lot more children fall victim to identity theft than adults. You need to worry about your kid's identity being stolen more than yours. Your kid is a blank slate, and identity thieves like blank slates because they're easier to work with. It sounds a little counterintuitive at first, but it makes sense. We don't check on our children's credit because, well, there's nothing to check, right? They're just kids. Actually, that's precisely why thieves target them, because adults don't check. Thieves can get away with their crime for years with devastating, costly consequences. This is as good of a time as any to say it's a good idea for you to pull your credit report and your children's credit reports, for that matter, once a year, just to see if there's something suspicious on there that you don't recognize, or an error. One victim of the study was a teen from Kentucky named Nathan. At age 14, Nathan already had multiple lines of credit and a foreclosed mortgage in his name. The thief lived thousands of miles away in California. He had even bought a $600,000 home. Again, courtesy of Nathan's social security number. The trail of crimes stretched back a decade to when Nathan was only 4. And I'm only going to share with you one more. Another child victim from Arizona had racked up $725,000 in debt by the time she was 17. There were 8 suspects in this case. 8. And they'd used her credentials to take out mortgages, auto loans, and credit cards, and to pay for medical bills and utilities. I don't know about you, but it's a complete nightmare to imagine one of my kids growing up, getting ready to enter the working world, getting ready to become a college student, getting ready to engage with their personal financial life, just to find out that their identity's been stolen, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and they have a completely trashed credit record due to identity theft. This is why earlier I said you need to have your child added to your identity theft protection plan. And this is why it's so important to take your new child's credit and freeze it so that nobody can open up a credit account, a new line of credit, without having to jump through some extra hoops that you can keep secured. It's really not that hard to steal someone's identity if you have their social security number and a little bit of extra information. And as far as social security numbers go, they're really not that secure. Let's go back to a little clip from the CGP Grey video and find out why.
Social Security number was never designed to be used this way in the long ago, and you can tell because it has no security built into it. Okay, so there's this neat trick that most ID numbers use where they can check themselves to see if they're invalid. The simplest way is to have the last couple digits match the sum of the others. All kinds of ID cards and barcodes do this because it makes it impossible to enter an incorrect number in a computer and makes it harder for fraudsters to guess valid numbers. This is why if you try to buy something online by guessing a credit card number, the website knows it's invalid before you even click buy.
Isn't that interesting? This topic fascinates me. How cool and clever is it that you can build some sort of security trick into a number like that?
But because the Social Security number started life in the long ago, it's just a number with no self-checking security built in. Worse, if you were born pre-2011, it's not that hard to just guess most of the number. The first 3 digits are the state where the parents applied for the card, and the last 4 digits just count up in order, and the middle digits follow a regular pattern. So you can take your number, subtract 1, and that's a valid number of someone who was probably born in the same hospital as you around the same time. Thus, a fraudster who knows your time and location of birth can probably get the first 5 digits by just looking them up on a chart. Institutions ask for the last 4 digits as a code to identify you as you, which means it's not that hard to put together your number from a security leak anywhere, or just by connecting a few puzzle pieces.
How remarkably disappointing is that? And what's crazy is I've shared with you just now, because it's fun, some of my child's birth story. I didn't tell you specifically the hospital, but you probably know what city I'm from. And you know the month that my child was born. You know when Isaac was born, roughly. You could figure it out. I don't think it would actually be that hard. I think it would be very easy for someone who was good at a little bit of social engineering and detective work to steal his identity, which is why it's all the more important to get his credit frozen. I did this for Oliver, and I'm doing it for Isaac. I received his social security number actually in the mail this past Saturday, this weekend. And as soon as I did, I sprang into action. I went to all 3 credit bureau websites, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Each one of them has a process for putting a security freeze on a minor's credit. All you need to do is send them a packet full of all of the information that someone would need to steal their identity. Isn't that smart? You have one little envelope which has everything in it that is needed to steal the child's identity in the mail right when they're most vulnerable. They don't take this kind of thing over websites for some reason. They have to go snail mail. All 3 of them do this. They have forms, processes, and procedures, and they tell you exactly what to put in, and it's different for all 3 of them. A little frustrating. So yes, you gather up all of the sensitive information about your new child, and in many cases, stuff about you that's sensitive. You put it in an envelope, and you send it to 3 separate organizations that are private companies. They're not government related at all. And you say, please, I trust you with this information. For some reason, put a freeze on their credit. Because this sketches me out, I send it over certified mail just to know that they got it, know that it wasn't lost, and know that the letter wasn't stolen somewhere along the way. But anyway, freezing your child's credit makes it significantly harder for a thief to open up a line of credit. And given that their social security number is not secure really at all, this is probably one of the best things that you can do, shy of having an identity theft protection service, to keep them safe so that when they turn 18, they don't have a trashed credit history. Now, from my experience, you need to know something. You're going to find this out if you pursue freezing your dependent's credit, but you're going to end up getting information back from the credit unions. And this information, in some cases it's a little number, is going to be required to unfreeze the credit. You're going to need to give this number to your minor to take care of so that they can unfreeze their credit, at least temporarily, if they want to go get a mortgage, or if someone needs to have a hard inquiry on their credit history, which will happen. Without that number, they're in for a world of hurt. So you gotta guard that number with your life and make sure that you don't lose it for all 3 credit bureaus. Unless, of course, one of them doesn't require you to have a unique number that they issue for you to unfreeze your credit. Okay, and this leads me to the last thing that I want to share with you, the last thing that I've done in the last couple weeks for my son. And that is to open up an educational savings account, an ESA or a 529 for them. Because I don't know about you, but I've got family members who like to write little birthday cards for the kids, and there's little bits of money in them. What are they going to do with that when they're an infant? You're not going to go and open a savings account for that little baby. Well, that money's going to do a lot more good invested than it is going to do sitting in a piggy bank. So what I've done is I've opened up an educational savings account so that I can take those little bits of money, as well as some of my own, and drop it in the account and let it grow so that they have some money for higher education when they get there. These little kids have so much time on their hands between now and when they're going to need the money for college. And if they don't end up needing it for college, due to the Secured Act 2.0, they can roll it right over into a Roth IRA. If that money wasn't a 529. ESA, you can't do that, but you can move an ESA to a 529. So it almost doesn't matter. As long as you have both accounts there, you can move the ESA money to a 529 before it's too late. Then roll that into a Roth IRA if they don't use it for higher education. And then basically what you've done is you've opened up an account where that $5 bill, $10 bill, $20 bill that comes in the mail becomes a massive blessing for them down the road and helps set them up for a hope-filled financial future that we can only dream of. Is there something that I forgot today that you would have done in the first 2 weeks after having a kid in the way of managing your personal financial life and theirs? Let me know in the comments below, and until next week, until next Tuesday, budget bravely and enjoy your hope-filled financial future.